Hello, and welcome to our first night of King's Hammer Speaker Series. We are so excited to launch this and bring an incredible lineup of speakers right to your homes. If you have questions tonight for our speaker, feel free to drop them in the chat box on whichever platform you are using to view this, or you can use the hashtag Speaker Series. We'll try to answer as many as we can. And now we are so excited to present our first speaker. He is an internationally known TEDx speaker and the founder of the Changing the Game project. He is the author of 2 number-1 best-selling books, Changing the Game and Every Moment Matters. He is the host of the Way of Champion podcast, and this is just a few of the many accomplishments. Some of our coaches saw him live at the United Soccer Coaches annual convention, and we have been so eager to bring him to you ever since. He is John O'Sullivan, and you are in for a treat tonight. Take it away, John.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me on. So excited to be here. Thank you all, King's Hammer family, for carving some time out of your busy schedules tonight, toting your kids around, figuring out all the craziness in this world right now. I do the same thing. I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. And these days it's just a little bit different, but I am truly honored to be the one to kick off this series. Some of the speakers, I know you have Sky Eddie Bruce coming up next. You have Tom Byer, who I've gotten to know over the last number of years, some great speakers. And what I'm so excited about is that your club, your organization is making this effort to get better. I've been doing this a long time. I've traveled all over the world and worked with sport governing bodies that are winning Olympic medals, that are competing in World Cups. And the one thing that I can promise you that's consistent across the board is no one's perfect. But the best ones are always working to get better, to get stronger, and their coaches, their parents, their volunteers, their supporters, their administrators, everyone's working to move forward. Now, my background, just a little bit before I get going, I grew up in New York. I was a collegiate soccer player at Fordham University in New York City. I played in a league called the USISL for a little while. And then I went and started coaching. I coached some college soccer at University of Vermont, actually with one of your academy coaches, Ryan Levesque. And then I also then coached youth, and I coached youth there in Vermont and Michigan. And now for the past 15 years, I have lived in Oregon, and I work with a club with my own kids' teams, which is an affiliate of the Portland Timbers of Major League Soccer. So I am there at the front as a coach. I'm there at the front as a parent, living this with high school age players and middle school age players. And I am there at the front as an advocate for the children and for the parents and for coaches that, you know, sport development's a 3-legged stool. And if we don't help every leg, if we remove a leg, if we ignore the parents, if we ignore the coaches, if we ignore the players, the stool collapses. And so I hope tonight that I am able to set the table for these amazing speakers that you have coming up and give you some ideas of what a great environment looks like. Because, well, let's just get started. Katie, how about you throw up my presentation there, and we'll just get rolling through this. Katie, how do I actually advance my presentation now that it's in there? Do I do that myself, or do you have to do that?
You can do that yourself.
I'm not sure how. That's the thing. So it says I'm sharing, but I don't see my PowerPoint screen. Wait, hold on. There we go. Perfect. So that advances it. Perfect.
Awesome.
Cool. New platform for me here. So I wanted to start with these core values that the club has and that they're launching and talking about: respect and leadership and passion and integrity and creativity, and just talk about how important those type of things are. I think a lot of organizations, you know, they have a nice web page with core values. They have a nice list of them, but the issue is most people don't know what they are. And when no one knows what they are, whether you're on a team or whether you're in a club or in a school, then they're not really real. And I think that this talk tonight is kicking off of really, how do we take these things from our in our head to a web page, and then to our hearts so that we live these things. And what that does is that helps our organization become not just transactional. You sign up for learning soccer, but transformational. We make your son, we make your daughter a better human being, and we happen to use soccer as the vehicle. But while we're teaching soccer, we're developing character. We're teaching your kids to work well with others. We're teaching them to deal with adversity. We're modeling the right behaviors. We're modeling vulnerability and not afraid to admit when we're wrong. These are what truly, truly transformational organizations do. And I've been lucky over the last number of years to work with some and watch their numbers go through the roof, watch their player retention get stronger and stronger every year, watch their coach retention get stronger because people want to come there and coach because it's a great environment to work in. And also watch their parents really take ownership of this organization and say, you know what, we're proud to be here. And this is our sideline. And maybe we do things a little bit differently here. And if you don't like it, that's okay. Maybe it's just not for you. So I want to help sort of take these values and take them from our heads to our hearts. And to do that, really think about, well, what do our kids need these days to have a truly transformational experience? So to do that, I want to cover these couple of topics here. Number one, understanding our Gen Z kids today, because they're different certainly than we were as parents. I'll turn 50 this year, and I know my kids live a very different life than I do. I remember when my daughter first asked me, Dad, how old were you when you got your first cell phone? I was like 32, and she thought that was kind of shocking. I want to understand, why kids play sports and why they quit. And then a couple of really important things that we can do as parents and as coaches to help our kids fall in love, stay in the game, get better. And that's these ideas of that feelings equals function, using these little acronyms, RIVER and LOVE to connect. And then I want to talk about the ride home and how that is one very, very specific area that makes a huge difference. Okay. So understanding our Gen Z kids, right? Kids today, this is what the science says, and this is some research there. There's the link at the bottom if you want to take a deeper dive into this. But how is Gen Z different? Well, here's a couple of their needs. They need to know the why. Our kids are very connected these days to what's going on socially and politically in the world. Their access to information is so far greater, right? They're not stuck looking through the card catalog like a lot of us were, right? They're born with devices in their hands. And so they need to know the why. And so as an organization, as a coach, as a parent, explaining to them why something is happening, engaging in that conversation, truly communicating and truly listening is super important. So that's that effective in-person communication. They are so often on their devices, but one of the most important things we can do is say, put that down and look us in the eye, and let's have a good conversation about that. I had a conversation like that with my son today about something going on in his soccer world. My kids are finishing their semester of online school right now. They have another week, and then they start going back to a hybrid model the second week of February. And so I'm constantly back and forth with them when I'm home. How's it going? Do you need me to review anything for you? And all that sort of stuff. But, not via text. Let's look at each other in the face. Let's put down the devices and have a good talk. Because of devices, right? Shorter attention span for Gen Z kids. So it's so important, especially for coaches. Be clear, be concise, get in, get out, make your point, get out, right? I work with some young coaches and I look at them and I see them going on this conversation, and here's the second point, and here's the third point, and here's the fourth point. And I always go back to the political commentator, James Carville. He says, if you make 3 points, you make none. So make one well. So I think as coaches and as parents, as we're moving forward, right, make your point, be clear, be concise, move on. Build independence. Our kids these days, they're very much stuck. They live at home longer. A lot of them go off there. There's a great book, Julia Lythcott-Haynes, about how to raise an adult and how She was the freshman dean at Stanford, and these incredibly smart, talented, gifted kids would show up and they didn't know how to do their laundry. They didn't know how to go pick up their mail. They didn't know how to bring their bags to their room. So one of the great things that we can do as coaches and as a sports club and as parents is help them build independence. Say, that's a great idea. Go ahead and get that done. I totally agree that, you should have that. You should do that. How are you going to earn the money to do that? It's a really important thing to do. And promote resiliency. And this is a great role for us as parents, that sport is this amazing place to experience adversity. It's this amazing place to struggle. Maybe you're not getting the playing time or playing your position, or you've had a couple of bad games in a row. And so saying to your kids, well, what's good about this? Not intervening on their behalf when a situation is difficult, but say, how are you going to work your way through that? Sport is this perfect place to promote resiliency that is going to go far beyond sport, right, into life for them. Okay. So we also need to understand why kids participate in sports, because after all, if we want them to stay in, well, it's got to be about that. Now, I think most of us understand that when we ask children, why do you play? 99% say because it's fun. But what does fun mean? Because it means something different to children than it does to adults, but not always what we think. And a lot of adults think that when kids say, oh, I want this to be fun, they mean it's fooling around and it's not serious. But actually, that's not what kids say. So this woman, Amanda Visick from George Washington University, did a really interesting study. She asked kids, why do you play? Because it's fun. And then she was the first one who said, well, define fun. And children came up with 81 characteristics of fun. And here's the top 6. Trying your best. When the coach treats a player with respect. Getting playing time. Playing well as a team. Getting along with your teammates. Exercising and being active. These are the things that make sports fun. Now notice what's not in the top 6 is winning. That's slid in at a solid number. 48 out of 81 things. Winning. Now kids like to win. They want to win, but it's not as important as having that chance to play, or the word that we like to use, having the chance to compete. When my kids were in elementary school and they'd play sports at recess, no one stacks the team at recess. They make the team even, and they'd come home and complain because someone was absent and the teams weren't fair that day. But winning is great, but kids, if you ask them, would you rather win 3-2 this week and lose 3-2 next week and know that you're in really competitive, exciting games? That's what they want, much more so than win 10-0, win 10-0. Winning is part of learning. Winning is when we learn the most. Losing is when we learn the most. I'm sorry. And winning and losing is part. We don't want to lose all our games, but we don't want to win them all either. And winning doesn't drive fun. Competing does. The top 3 categories. What Amanda Visick did, which was really cool, is she asked the kids, she handed their list of stuff back to them. She laminated 81 things. And she said, just like when you go out with your Halloween candy, sort them into piles after you get done trick-or-treating, right? Well, sort these into piles. And so they came up with 11 piles about what made sports fun. And the 3 top piles were trying hard, which meant competing, challenging practices, learning new things. Positive team dynamics. So getting along with your teammates, being supportive, treating each other with respect. And positive coaching. This is what drives enjoyment. This is what drives engagement. And in no way, shape, or form does this mean it can't be hard, that it can't be challenging. I want kids to walk off my field when I coach and say, man, that was tough. When can we do that again? That's enjoyment. It's not necessarily pleasure, but that's enjoyment. And that's what we're looking for. And that's what drives participation. Now, what do they want from coaches? I do this activity a lot with coaches where I ask them, list the 5 qualities of the best coach that you've ever had. And the coaches come up with things like enjoyment and funny and caring and passionate and all these things. What we then do is we take this list and we stick them up on the wall. I give them 5 sticky notes and say, write down the 5 qualities. And we stick them up on the wall, but on one wall, we say, put all the sticky notes that have to do with knowledge of the sport. And on the other wall, we put all the sticky notes that have to do with connection, emotional intelligence. And that's where most of the sticky notes lie. 80, 90%. And every time I've done this all over the world, what are the qualities of the best coach? It's all about connection. Knowledge of the sport matters, but it's not sufficient. So as members of this organization, this is what we want from our coaches. We want respect and encouragement. We want good role models. We want good communication and listeners. And we also want them to understand the game. Now, we can't, we don't just throw out, right, the drills and the games-based activities and all that. No, that's what we do. We're after all, we're a soccer club, but that's just not sufficient. One thing makes you a trainer, but the whole package there in front of you, that's what makes you a coach. And we want people to be coaches. We want people to be mentors. And I've been doing this long enough now that I've had some really incredible moments in my life. And just 3 days ago, again, another one where a former player of mine who I last coached 8 years ago when she was about 14, or I guess 10 years ago now, she's getting married. And I got that save the date in the mail. And what an incredible thing is that? And I guarantee you, when she was coming up with that list of who am I going to invite to this important life event, it wasn't like, oh, how about John? He taught me the 4-3-3, right? It's not that at all. It's because he cared about me, not just as an athlete, but as a human being, but as a person who's an individual and who's different and who needs different things, but who needs to be cared for, needs to feel belonging, and needs to feel safe. That's what great coaching is. And that's what I hope King's Hammer is working towards. And I think, there's 2 types of people. There's the ones who just find everything that's wrong and complain about it. Or there's people who go and say, no, we're going to hold our club accountable. I'm going to run for the board. Are you going to manage and volunteer? Those are the type of people that drive great organizations. My own club here in town, if I pull back the curtain later, you'll see the snow outside. Well, guess what we've had to do if we wanted to keep training this week? Heck, I've been driving the snow plow to plow off our fields so the kids can go out there. And the worst emails I get are someone saying, why is practice canceled tonight? Why aren't you done plowing? And my response is, why haven't you picked up a shovel? Why don't you come out and help? Because a lot of people are out there trying to get the kids out there, and you can too. So get involved. Get involved. So why do kids quit? Here's the big 3. When they lose ownership of the experience, when they lose enjoyment, and when they lose intrinsic motivation. So those 3 things. That's the currency of long-term participation. And long-term participation then develops mastery. And then when we add mastery to that list, that's when people get really good. But a lot of kids walk out of sports, right? And we know that we lose so many of them by the age of 13. And especially now during COVID, we're going to have a huge drop off. We've already, early numbers said 50% increases or decreases in activity rates. And usually it's the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder that suffers the most. But so many kids are isolated or they're alone or whatever, and they all of a sudden get separated. So we have to help our kids own this experience. It's got to be their goals, not ours. We just talked about enjoyment. And then they need to be intrinsically motivated. They go outside in the backyard and pick up the ball and get better, or is always us harping on them? Because they'll comply for a while if it's always us and if it's our goals, but eventually they'll just stop. And I've seen so many kids who were good, but it didn't belong to them. They just wanted to walk away. So we want to make sure that our kids own it, they enjoy it, and they're intrinsically motivated to get better. So what are some of the things that take this away? Well, I believe my next slide is a video that we're going to have Katie cue up for you. Katie, you ready to go?
They just scored another goal, but I figured fourth like this better. I got it. It's like a cheerleader on crack.
So when you watch that video, we see a mom, and there's, all you gotta Google is crazy sports parents, and you'll find, multiple search returns. But, she loves her kids, of course. She loving them in a helpful way. That's the thing. Now, I just found that video. I didn't film it. It was just a random thing I found online. I spent years showing it, wondering if I'd ever show it in a town where it was actually filmed. That did actually happen, but no one beat me up in the parking lot, thankfully. But when we look at this, right, those kids are very, very young. But already what's happening with that is they're losing a little bit of ownership. Think about this incredible game of soccer where in a split second, a player has to, perceive what's around them and come up with a couple of possible solutions for the problem that the game presents, and then choose one, and then technically execute it, and then assess their choice, and then do it again and again and again. They can't possibly listen to us telling them to kick it, to pass it, to do that. All we're doing in those moments is stealing their opportunity to learn. It's just like if you went to the weight room and you were lifting a heavy weight, and here comes, numbers 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're struggling. If your strength and conditioning coach stepped in and said, "Hey, I'll do 7, 8, 9, and 10 for you," you're not getting any better. Well, the game presents all these moments of challenge and difficulty in decision making. When we yell to our kids on the field, I'm not saying things like cheering for them and saying great job, but when we say pass it or run here or do this, we're stealing decisions. We're stealing the reps from them. And when we steal the reps, we start to steal ownership. And one of the things is I think we understand in other aspects of our kids' life, we don't do this. I've been to a dozen or so middle school band and orchestra concerts, and sometimes the noise that you hear in that moment is slightly shocking. But I've never ever seen a dad stand up in the middle of it and say the woodwinds are killing us tonight. Right? That would never happen because we get it. Like that wouldn't help in the moment. Well, it doesn't help here. So taking that step back and taking that deep breath and letting our kids explore and learn and solve problems, and when they don't solve them well, learn from those moments, that's the key to great sports parenting. And that's the key to great coaching as well. So I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, my coach, he's just sitting there on the sideline. She's just sitting there." Yeah, they're sitting there because they coached all week. And then the game on the weekend, that's for the kids. That's for us as coaches to figure out, what have they learned and what do we need to continue to work on? Okay, so don't panic in those moments. Let them fail. Let them struggle. It's a good thing. So how can we start, giving back? How can we engage our kids a little bit more? This little equation here is one of the most important things we can remember. And the idea is feeling equals function. How we feel is how we're going to function. And I cannot stress that enough. The college coaches I work with, the college teams that we work with, the youth teams, if you don't get the feeling right, if it doesn't feel good, if I don't feel good about myself, if I'm not feeling confident, if I'm feeling like I might let mom or dad down, if I feel like the coach doesn't trust me, I will never function my best. And so we're trying to create a memorable experience, but we're always trying to get the feeling right. And so oftentimes, this is when you see a child struggling, and maybe the feeling's not right because they're coming off an injury and they've been out for a while. And now they're struggling to get back. I see a lot of this with older players when they have a big injury, like something like an ACL. And 6 months later, the doctor says, oh, yeah, you're cleared to play. But you're not mentally cleared to play. You're not. And so many kids expect that, oh, I'm just going to go right back where I was. But that's not what happens. Right? That's not what happens. It takes a while. It takes a year. It takes 18 months. So the feeling isn't right until they feel like, okay, here I go. I'm back at it now. So one of the things that we can do as coaches, get the feeling right, create the culture in our team that when kids come to practice, they love being there and they love working hard, but they also feel good about themselves. We've caught them being good. Right? We call these little rule of one moments. One person, one comment, one time can change a life forever. It can stick with them forever. It can carry them for a month when you catch them being good there. And the same thing with us as parents. If we storm up and down the sidelines, if our arms are crossed, if we, get our kids scared that we're disappointed in them or we love them less because of how they played, the feeling's not going to be right. So feeling equals function. Super important. Number 2, call this the river, as my friend Jerry Lynch, his little acronym. And the picture there is a picture that I took in 2019. It seems like a world away. I was able to take my daughter's team over to France for the Women's World Cup. And that was the picture after the U.S. beat France in the quarterfinal. An amazing game, an incredible atmosphere, 50,000 screaming fans, and an amazing performance. And I just watched this team get together in a circle here and so close. And I watched the way that Jill Ellis interacts with her players, and they all interact with each other. And it made me think of the river. So when do people perform their best? When do they really feel right so they function well? Well, when they feel relevant, when they feel like I matter. Nothing turns a kid off more than feeling like, if I didn't show up to the game this weekend, no one would care. No, coach has to care. Teammates have to care. Especially now, it's been really amazing during COVID, some of the Division I college teams that I work with. And one of the things we talked about is it's not about being the best player on the team, it's being the best player for the team. Because when you're trying to keep a COVID-free bubble in an athletic department, everyone's actions matter. You might not be lined up to play a minute all season, but if you go and you break protocol, if you're out there going to parties, not wearing a mask, whatever it is, you infect your whole team. You could cost your whole team a season. So every single player is relevant, and how important it is that they realize that their actions matter. And as in youth programs, this is especially important because we really don't know sometimes, right? Before kids hit their growth spurt, we don't know how good they're going to be. They might be a little bit slow. They might struggle. They might not be very good when they're 9 or 10 or 11. They might be born in December instead of January. And so everyone says, look at him. He's slow. He's small. He's not that good. But if we change the age cutoff range to November 1st, all of a sudden we're like, wow, that kid's really good. So we need to make everyone feel relevant. We need to inspire them. How do we inspire them? Have them read a biography of a player they admire. Have them go watch games. You have an MLS program in your backyard. When you're allowed to go watch games again, go watch games. You have the MLS champions a couple hours up the road. Go watch games. Inspire them. Find a role model. Find a hero. Try to be like her. Try to be like him. Listen to an interview with them. Learn how they struggle, and that it's okay to struggle, right? So engaged players are inspired. Engaged players are validated. So it's similar to relevance, right? That they feel like my contribution matters. What I do in this group matters. Coach sees me. And this is one of the most important things, is just this idea that I see you. I think sometimes there's too much false praise out there for kids. Oh, you're great. Oh, it's awesome. You know, some days it's not awesome. Some days it's not great. But you can validate a young athlete by saying, hey, you know what? I know today wasn't your day. I know today wasn't your best day, but that's okay. Here's some of the things that I thought you did well, even though your passing wasn't on, even though you missed all your shots. Here's how you contributed. I remember this great video of Steve Kerr talking to Steph Curry about this and saying to Steph Curry, hey, I realize here's your points, here's your shots, but here's your plus minus, right? We're a better team when you're out there, even if you're not scoring. And you see this smile on Steph Curry's face because he just was made to feel validated, right? That's the river. Empowered, right? So I have power over my destiny. I have that internal locus of control. I'm not powerless to get better. I'm in the right environment. I feel like I'm listened to. I feel like I can communicate. I feel like I have a voice. Players, athletes, human beings who get to weigh in are more likely to buy in. So we have to empower them. And then respected, because ultimately these are all people. And we don't want to just coach the sport. We want to coach the child. We want to coach the person in sport. And if we show them respect as a human being, great things happen. I make a point of trying to, especially if one of my players misses something for a different activity, right? I live in Central Oregon. I have kids who go hunting. I have kids who are competitive Irish dancers. I have kids who do all these other things. And when they miss a game or something because of an Irish dancing competition, the first thing I ask them is, hey, how'd that go? How'd you? That's the first thing I ask them, not, oh man, we missed you this weekend. And yeah, we did miss you, but how'd the dancing go? Or do I go, I had a kid who was a great volleyball player. I'd go watch her high school volleyball games because I'm respecting you as the whole person and not just the soccer player. So when people feel relevant and inspired and validated and empowered and respected, right? That's when they're at their best. That's when they're feeling their best. That's when they're really, really engaged. And then this is one of the most important things that we can do. We have to let the ride home belong to our children. In university level research out of Australia and some anecdotal research in the US from a group called Proactive Coaching, when they ask athletes, like, what's your worst memory of sport? It's often the ride home. They're emotionally exhausted, and yet we got them locked in the car. And we're going to make this a teachable moment. And yet what kids tell us over and over is that this might not be the best teachable moment. This might actually be the worst moment to have a discussion about the game. And so I have a video for you here that Katie will cue up here. And this is from a documentary called Trophy Kids. I think it still might even be on Netflix or something. But this is actual documentary footage of the ride home for a young football player and his dad. So, Katie, why don't you play that second video?
Did you tell the coach to put you inside the game?
Yep.
How many times?
I was standing right next to him.
Are you sure? Because I stood right next to you.
I was by him as many times as I could be.
Dude, you're not getting it done. Let me explain something to you. If you do something wrong, do I tell you?
Yeah.
Okay, I correct it. Or I tell you so you can correct it. How do you know what to correct if you don't even know why he pulled you out of the game? What'd I tell you about that? Are you scared of him or something?
No.
So why don't you go ask him? Like right now, you know we're gonna have this conversation after the game. You know it's coming. Okay, this is part of you becoming a young man. If someone does something, you're just gonna take it? So if I was to walk up to you and just slap you inside your face, what are you gonna do? Just turn around and be like, I don't know why that guy did that. It doesn't make any sense, Jay. You act like you're 10 or 9 or 8. Dude, you're just going through the motions. If you're gonna be selfish, you know what? You have other brothers and sisters, okay? We'll take you from out of that school and give them a chance and put them in a private school. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It confuses me. What's the problem?
Every time I come back, like in the car, I always feel like I'm in trouble or I did something wrong.
Well, did you?
Yeah.
You've had more personal training than any of those kids out there. Okay. Back to the drawing board. Back up to getting early, back up inside the morning. Okay. Because it doesn't make any sense. You have me driving back and forth from this school, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for you to go out and do absolutely nothing. I don't understand why you don't get it. I don't understand it.
So I think it's a pretty powerful video. And it's one that I've shown for a number of years now. And it always elicits a response, especially, in an auditorium. And there's usually one or two, usually dads, sadly, hanging back at the end when I'm done speaking and everyone else leaves, and they'll come up to me and say, that was me in that video. I've never looked at myself that way, but that's got to be what my kid feels like. Tears in his eyes day after day as I'm giving him the 10th degree. I did a conference yesterday, virtually, obviously, from Asia, and I got an email today from one of the participants. He said I had to shut off my Zoom camera because I started crying because I recognized that was me. And he said, I'm a coach and I work so hard to make my kids feel good. But then as a dad, sometimes that's me right there because I just want the best for my children. And I just have high expectations for them. And I want them to do the things or have some of the things that I didn't. Says, but I never really get to look them in the eyes when I'm having that conversation. And so what's really interesting is if you've seen that show, at the end of that kid quits football. And he also moves out. His parents were divorced. He leaves his dad's house and goes to live with his mom. So that dad with high expectations, only wanting the best for his son, lost not only the football player, but lost his son, lost the relationship with his son. And I posted that on Facebook a number of years ago. And it was a really interesting debate. And people said, that dad, like he's making sacrifices trying to help his kid out. And other people said, yeah, but look at your kid crying in the back seat. And then this guy chimes in. He says, I was the cameraman. I was sitting in the front seat. I was filming that. And he told the story how the dad was a really high level football player and he wanted his son to be as well. His dad was drafted into the NFL, but then didn't make it. I forget, it was an injury or he got in trouble or something. So he just wanted it for his son. But his son didn't want it. His son had no drive to play football. He was complying. His son had no desire. He didn't have what his dad had there. Football wasn't his thing. Maybe art was, maybe literature was, maybe something else was, but it wasn't football. You could tell by the way the kid did go through the motions. And he didn't feel good. He didn't function well because the feeling was awful. And so I think it's so important to remember that when we're on the ride home, that has to be a place where we take into account the state of mind of our kids. If your son or daughter brings it up and says, hey, how do you think I did? That's an invitation to have a discussion, hopefully unemotional. What I always say to my daughter when she asks me that is, okay, great. What went well? Because something always went well, even if they didn't have a good game. And then I say, well, what needs work, right? What didn't go as well? What needs work? And there's a couple things. Okay, what can we do in practice this week? Or what can we work on so that next weekend we can be better at those things? And whether she had a fantastic game or whether she had a poor game, we have that conversation. That question's never occurred to my son. He's never once asked, right, how did I do? He's asked what's for lunch or what's for dinner, right? But then at night when he's going to bed, that's his time. That's when he'll turn around and be like, hey, so how do you think I did? That's when he's ready to have that conversation. And if I violate that time in the car by forcing it, usually because, right, I'm angry because he didn't do well or something, It never ends well. And this is really hard. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I haven't put my kids in tears in the car. But I work really, really hard not to, because if you do that too often, they'll eventually just walk away. So letting that ride home belong to them, absolutely key. And then here's my last thought for you, right? And this was the theme of the TED Talk that I did, right? The idea worth sharing, as they tell us to have. Just love watching your kids play. It's really the only thing you need to say to them after a game, right? I love watching you compete. I love watching you play, because it frees them from the burden of thinking that they're responsible for your happiness, because certainly how they do in sport should never be the reason that you're happy or fulfilled in your life. And so another acronym we use when we talk about loving your kids, right? Listen to them, understand them, validate them, right? Have that conversation. What went well? What needs work? What can you work on this week? Seek to understand what they're saying back. Validate their opinion. Then maybe disagree if you're not seeing it the same way. But if you could just love watching your kids play, love watching them compete, and find great times to have a more in-depth conversation about performance, you are miles ahead of a lot of people. And so I have one last video here for you that Katie will cue up here in a second. I just want to set the table for this because I just saw it about 2 days ago, and that was the day of the anniversary of the death of Kobe Bryant. 1 year that him and his daughter and her coach passed away in that terrible helicopter crash. And this is a video recorded right before he passed away with a guy named Lewis Howes. And in this video, Kobe is talking about being a 10 or 11-year-old basketball player. So go ahead, Katie, play that video.
And here I come playing, and I don't score 1 point the entire summer.
Really?
Not one.
How old were you?
11, 10, 11.
And you're playing against other 10, 11-year-olds?
Uh-huh.
Or you didn't score once?
Not one.
Were you in the game?
I was in the game
How did you not score?
because I was terrible.
Really?
Yeah. I remember crying about it and being upset about it. My father just gave me a hug and said, listen, whether you score 0 or score 60, I'm going to love you no matter what.
Wow.
Now, that is the most important thing that you can say to a child. Because from there, I was like, okay, it gives me all the confidence in the world to fail. I have the security there. But to hell with that, I'm scoring 60. Let's go.
Right.
Right, and from there, I just went to work. I stayed with it, and I kept practicing.
I think that just says it all right there. First of all, that Kobe Bryant, arguably one of the top 5 basketball players of all time, could go an entire summer when he's 11 and not score a single point and still become one of the top 5 basketball players of all time. Pretty important to recognize that. But number 2, that moment with his dad, when he said, no matter what, whether you score 0 or 60, I'll love you no matter what, because my love for you does not depend upon how many points you score. And that was the message, as Kobe said, that freed him, that it's going to be okay to make mistakes. It's going to be okay to fail. It's okay to mess up. And then his drive and his energy to get better made him one of the best ever. But that is such a critical thing right there, that if his dad didn't free him from that responsibility, if he was afraid that by being bad at basketball, his dad would love him less, we wouldn't know who Kobe Bryant is today. And so one of the greatest gifts that we can give our kids, one of the greatest things that we can do as an organization, if we want to be a transformational organization, one of the greatest things that we can do as coaches, if we want to be transformational coaches, is let our athletes, let our kids, let our children know that we love them no matter what. And the greatest coaches have a lot of love in their coaching, and the greatest parents have a lot of love in their parenting, and they can be demanding without being demeaning, and they can have high expectations, but also leave room for mistakes and failure. And if we can do that, team to team, age group to age group within our club, right? Then this becomes a learning environment. This becomes a place where people don't just become better soccer players, but they become better human beings. And they give back to their communities, and they make their communities healthier and happier. And then they go on and they coach, and they bring this message, and they bring this style of coaching that is truly transformational. That's what great clubs do. And I hope that I've been able to maybe kick that off and jumpstart that, and encourage some of you not only to make changes or maybe keep doing the same stuff at home, but can you do that a little bit more and give back a little bit more to your club and support your coaches, but then hold this club accountable as well, and learn and say we can be better and contribute to the greater good. So before we go to Q&A, I just wanted to put all my info up there, whether it's our website, changingthegameproject.com. We've got 8 years of blog posts on everything from parenting and coaching and great environments, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. That's my direct email. It goes straight to me. So if you have something to say that you might not want to ask a question here tonight, you can do that there. And then the podcast, Way of Champions podcast, we have over 200 episodes right now out there from athletes and coaches and sports scientists and psychologists and experts in so many different fields about how can we make sport better. As Katie mentioned in the beginning, those are my 2 books. And then that little yellow link right there, if you would like a free PDF copy of my book, Changing the Game, which is the book that I wrote for parents of how can you help them be happy, but also perform their very best. You can just go to that link and download it for free right there. Okay, so that's all that I have here, and hopefully you've taken the time, whatever platform you're on, to put in a few questions. And if you haven't, now's the time to do that. And we've got a chunk of time here to do a little Q&A. So thank you very much.
Awesome. I am not a player or a parent, and I kept finding myself just nodding emphatically, just agreeing with everything you were saying. It was so awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have collected some questions from our social media, but like John said, you can actually just pop them into the chat boxes on whatever platform you're using, and they will come straight to us. So we'll be monitoring that as we sort of jump into our first questions here. John, starting out, someone asked, can passion be taught or learned, or is it all self-driven?
I think it's both, right? I think there's I don't think anyone could argue that some kids are more passionate than others about a sport or about art or about music or whatever. But I also think environment can crush passion, or it can foster it as well. So I think we all, one of my great lifelong friends, he's now the coach of Toronto in Major League Soccer. And he said, I think everyone has a fire within them, and our job as coaches is to fan that, right? It's not to go lighting new fires. It's to fan the fire that's there. And sometimes one of the hardest things is when our kids are young and we see some 6-year-old who has lots of passion, and we look at our kid who is, playing with lizards on the side, and we're like, but that's okay. There's no rule that you have to, right? We're in this like cult of the head start so often that kids find their passion on their own schedule at their own time. And anyone who has more than one kid probably knows this, like they're all different. And so I think what you do is you introduce them to different things and help them find their passion, rather than trying to say this will be your passion, because for some kids that might work, but for others it's not. And I truly think when we look at the elite performers, they have such drive, right? And they have such passion, but someone didn't force that upon them. They had that themselves.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. All right. Someone has asked, how do core values impact culture, and specifically the culture of a club?
Well, It's a great question. And first of all, I mean, core values, that's your written definition of what we stand for, right? Culture being, this is how we do things here, right? This is what makes us different than everyone else. And the beautiful thing about core values is, they're nice when you're winning and they matter, but they're really important when things aren't going well. And maybe you've lost a couple of games and they're your touch point to say, well, wait a sec, right? Are we competing every day? Are we treating each other with respect? Are we playing with passion? So they're this sort of, it's the compass that keeps us heading in the right direction. And I liken it to my golf game of, the core values are the flag up there on the green, and my first ball goes this way, and the next one goes this way, and then this way, but I still know where I'm heading and where I'm going. And so the biggest challenge is, how do we make those real? And it's not something, like I said, it's not on a website, it's not on a web page. It's something that has to be talked about. It has to be taught, and it has to be rewarded. One of the biggest things in team sports that I find interesting is oftentimes we talk about teamwork and selflessness and being positive and respecting our teammates. And at the end of the season, we have an award, and what is it, right? MVP, which has nothing to do with anything that we said will make us great or what we value. And so I've worked with some amazing schools, and what they've done is they've kind of said, hey, our MVP, our all league people, they're going to get recognized. How about we reward the things that we value most? And that's pretty cool, because any kid on the team can win them, right? You can be the unsung hero. You can not play a lot of minutes, but be the one who drives the energy at practice and stuff like that. And so really, really critical.
My golf game sounds quite similar to yours. This question kind of goes off of what you were just saying, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more. How can a coach specifically exemplify these core values?
As a coach, we always want to be our authentic self within, and then what the values do is they give us the bumpers, right? That within this area, as long as I'm respectful, as long as I'm passionate, as long as I'm doing the things that we stand for, then I have to be me. But I think coaches always have to realize that, people hear what you say, but they remember what you do. So you can't talk about respect and then disrespect officials. You can't talk about integrity and then, not walk the walk, because people will remember that, especially kids. So you have to epitomize these. You have to live these things. And you have to admit, and this is okay, that, when you screw up, hey, I didn't live up to our values. And that's a pretty powerful thing for children as well, is to see adults in their life that they respect and looked up to say, hey, I screwed up too. That's one of the greatest things that any leader can ever say is, I screwed that up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Someone has asked us, in regards to integrity, what are the biggest challenges you have seen when working with youth coaches and with parents?
A lot of organizations say we value these things, but then what do they really value for that youth coach is winning, right? Or this high school coach is winning, right? So they say, we want you to do all these things, but then they fire you because you didn't win enough games. And so I think our culture of, win at all costs all of a sudden becomes, what will you compromise to win? And so there's things like player development, right? When people say, oh, I win a lot of games with my 10-year-olds. Oh, great. What? Stick one really fast kid up front and stick one in the back who can kick it a long way. And you're going to eventually kick enough balls over the top that you're going to win most of your games when you're 10 or 11. But guess what? At 16, 17, are those kids still going to be prepared to win a lot of games? Probably not. Right. And so it's finding that balance. So we as organizations have to really have sort of a model, right? A game model, a principles of play of, this is what we teach at each age. And if my 10-year-old coach is winning all his games, but he's not teaching any of these things because he's just throwing the fast kid up front, we have to step in and say, that's not okay. Or if we're saying we value all our kids, and then the 12-year-old coach you've got 3 kids who aren't getting in a game week after week, those kids are going to quit. We're not really doing anything, that lives up to our values. So when we put these things out there, we have to hold our coaches accountable. And this is the job of coaching directors, and it's not always easy. And I've been one, and it's not all, you're not always there to see everything, but man, it is, it's a hard thing, but it's really, really important. And clubs that relentlessly pursue that higher standard, they're the ones that sustain their success. And here's the biggest thing. As a coach, I've been around long enough to have won conference championships and state cups and all this sort of stuff. And what I realized after a while was none of those things that we call success are very fulfilling, right? Fulfillment comes with how you treat other people and what other people think of you. And the best coaches who can sustain great coaching, they might have success, but they also have fulfillment. And I just think that's one of the keys for sure.
Awesome. I think this final question that's come into our chat is a great one. And after hearing you speak, I am wondering the same thing. How do you stay so positive and so patient?
You should meet my players. They might not agree with that all the time. Okay, so we'll go back to golf. There's a wonderful golf book called Golf in the Kingdom, a guy named Michael Murphy. And I had Michael Murphy on our podcast. He's a great American philosopher, I guess we could call him that. This is like just a really spiritual book about golf. And one of the things that Michael said, he said, great athletes see the field from above, right? They see the whole thing. They don't just see the person in front of them, but they see the whole picture and understand where space and how I can exploit it. And I think that analogy, I think great parents and I think great coaches, they see the journey from above. They see that this youth sports journey of 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is, as this journey. And what happens this game or this week or this month or in this, the year 2020 with all we've dealt with and still are, this is a slice of the journey. And the most important thing that coaches and parents can do is see that big picture and see how can we get through this part of it, because we really won't understand the whole journey until we're looking back on it. And so I think that helps my patience is, that realistically, last January, 27th, I have no idea what the score of our game was. So why did I get so angry about it or upset about it? Right. In the grand scheme of things, it meant very little between what's happened then and and what's happened from then until today in terms of what's going on in the world. So that's patience and positivity and just trying to see the good. But it doesn't mean that I don't screw up often. I'm sure dinner's burning downstairs right now. It's probably my fault, right? So, so you just, you just do your best and you admit when you're wrong, and then you move on. And when you run a bad practice, you say, players, that one's on me. Let me fix that. When we play a bad game, instead of blaming them, I start with myself and say, what could I have done differently in that moment? What could I have taught them better? I don't know. I just, that's it. And I think age, right? Age, experience, having your own kids, all that really helps for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have a couple more that have popped up here. So,
great. And hey, I see someone also asked for the link to the book again. And it's just my website. So changingthegameproject.com. And then it's free CTG book, free Changing the Game book. Awesome. And that's the thing.
And I just popped that in there too. So you guys can copy that and paste it. Okay, John, outside of burning dinner, what was your biggest learning moment as a coach and as a parent?
Biggest learning moment as a coach. I wrote about this in of my last book, and it was when I was coaching at University of Vermont, and I got a call from a former player that I had coached when I lived in North Carolina, and he was now done with high school. He was done with college. He was actually applying to UVM to go to medical school. And he called me up and we chatted and figured out when he was coming up that we'd get together. And they said, Coach, I just want to say thank you. And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, thank you. He goes, every time I'm in the weight room, every time I need to study more, I think of your words. I think of, you saying, do a little more. Is that your best effort? And I remember I hung up the phone and I was talking to the other coach with me at the time. And I told him the story. He's like, that's great. I'm like, that's not great. That's like the worst thing I ever heard. And he said, what do you mean? It's like, because like for every kid like him, like I liked him, but there was a lot of other kids I wasn't a very good coach for. Mm-hmm. And so that moment right there is when I recognized that coaching is hard, and we work with kids, and it's public and it's emotional, and we keep score. And yet something we say or something that we do can stick with a kid for the rest of their life. And the kicker is we don't get to pick what they remember. Mm-hmm. Right. So I sign off every podcast with this little saying we have, which is your influence is never neutral. It's either positive or negative. So be intentional about it, because you will leave a mark. And recognizing the power of our influence, in that moment, I recognized the power of my influence as a coach, and that I had to be maybe a little more thoughtful about what spewed out in times of stress and emotion, for sure. Mm. Parenting, Jesus, I mean, like how much longer do we have here on this thing to talk about my insightful parenting moments? I mean, these things seem to happen on a daily basis. I think, my son, who's my youngest, is very much different than me. I'm kind of act now, ask questions later, just go. I can be very blunt. I can be very impatient. I can be a lousy listener. And my son is this incredible, empathetic human being who is so different than me, because I definitely score low in that area sometimes. And, I just think I think of different moments in my life for me or my wife when I'm having like a bad day, and he just senses it, and he'll come over and be like, hey, Dad, you look like you need a hug. Right? Like, those are the things that I'm like, you're a better person than me. Why is that? One so young. So I don't know. I mean, I think every morning you wake up, if you open your eyes, you're going to have a learning moment with your kids. And if I had a little more time to think about that, I probably could have come up with a crazy story, but
I'm sure there's plenty, especially now, virtual schooling and everything else.
Exactly. My kids now are just like, can we cut school and go skiing? Like, that's all they want to do right now. Make sure.
Totally. Okay. This question is about core values and how to engage the parents into understanding the importance of it. And specifically, like, how can the kids be supported at home as much as they are on the field?
Yeah, so that's a great thing. And I think this is what great teams do is, the parents have to know what the values are as well, because the parents are the most influential people in their lives. And so we have to teach them, hey, here's how you can help. So that starts with understanding, hey, this is what I'm trying to teach. This is what we stand for. This is what I'm talking about every single day. And if you and if you have any questions on how you can back this up, or you're not sure what this is about, like, let's have a conversation about it. But that, I think the most important thing that any coach can do when it comes to parents is just communicate. Let people know what's happening. And when I coached really young kids, I would go over 5 minutes before kickoff and say, hey, this is what we've been working on in practice. If you see this, please cheer for it. Right? We're trying to learn to play out of the back. So please don't yell, boot it long, right? Like, things like that, not super helpful in the moment. But if they try to play out of the back and we give the ball away and it ends up in the back of our net, we can't hold our heads and groan, or they won't try that again. Mm-hmm. And then, and then, I just give like little notes when my kids are in the middle of a season. I'll just send like little, 2 weeks. Hey, this is what we're working on. This is how it's going. I try to send notes to kids specifically when I see them, when they do something great, 3-4 lines of, you've been working. I see you've been staying after practice. You've been working hard. It really showed today. Your fitness is better and your touch has gotten so much better. Keep up the great work. Right. That little thing can fuel a kid for a long time. And by the same token, I'll email that to the parents and it'll say for Katie. Right. And so now they're going to read it and they know that I see their kid. And they know what's being backed up. And also when a kid's struggling, I'll do the same thing and say, you haven't been yourself. Is there anything I should know? And that's usually when I'll get the call from the parent saying, well, yeah, this is what's going on at home. And oftentimes there's nothing to do with soccer, right? Mm-hmm. Dad's got cancer, parents are getting separated, whatever it is, that really, again, goes back to, I'm not feeling well, so I'm not functioning well. But the more we teach parents on how they can support their kids, especially with regards to values, the better off we are.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm feeling inspired. I know everyone else is. We are at our conclusion. John, is there anything else that you want to say before we sort of sign off?
Again, just thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, King's Hammer, for inviting me on and letting me be a part of this great series. And, I hopefully will get to come back there in person sometime when we're past all this, but just enjoy the journey. I mean, now with a 13 and 15-year-old in my house, I can't believe how fast it's gone. And pretty soon there is no one to drive to practice anymore. And so when you look back on that journey, what was why'd you do it? What was the point of it? And hopefully you can find something good from a sporting perspective, from a life perspective. And, I just think that what you guys are doing as a club with the speaker series and sort of, it's kind of like a reset button. And every club should have a reset button every year and say, how can we do better? But anyone listening, I mean, there's this great sign I've seen at fields that says, before you complain, have you volunteered, right? Like I said to the kids the other day, before you complain, have you shoveled snow? And so give back to your club, because those are the best ones when people feel connected and give back a lot.
John, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us live and participated in our chat. This was really awesome, and we are just so excited. We have our next speaker, who is Sky Eddie Bruce, a former professional player and the founder of the Soccer Parenting Association. That is February 25th at 7 o'clock. We hope you will join us for that. Have an awesome night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.